Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to show you how to synthesize a acoustic sounding realistic piano using Harmor and Patcher. And it sounds like this. Hey. All right. So if you saw that last video I did, sorry, I guess. In progress. I didn't totally sure how my process about this at the moment, and I also was just bad at explaining what was happening. And a lot of people were telling me that I should demonstrate more, talk less, and also that maybe I could benefit from taking a list and writing it down of what I want to do in a video. And you know something? I did. So let's go ahead and look the list and not waste time. Okay, global concept. The way that the other one worked, I mused that if I make the string concept out of one of these, that if I want to do what the piano did, I have to lay them out the way that a piano is, which is that a bunch of them are one string, some of them are two strings, some of them are three strings. And it basically works out that the low end is one string, the middle range is a bunch of two strings, and then it turns into a lot of three strings. I don't know if there's more than that, but the value of knowing this is, as it turns out, if I just do that, if I just make this says unison 2, but I'm doing a thing where in the volume on unison pitch mapping, one of the voices is less. So this is really just a voice, and then there's this one, which is really two voices, and then there's this one, which is three voices. And they're all responsible for their spectrum and the piano board. And that's how I laid it out by doing it with this. This is a Vfx Splitter. Its purpose in life is that it accepts incoming notes and splits them out into multiple output voices, which are coming out through here and triggering the respective specific ranged Harmor. That's basically like what I started with, being like, okay, if I did okay that last time, because I ended up having the problem I described, which was that I only really made it work for its a real specific target area spectrum, where if I got out of that, it didn't really sound like the piano anymore. And there might just be a specific physical reason for that. So I decided to experiment and see if perhaps this was it. And I don't know if it was or not, but it definitely just made it easier just to target the spectrum differently like this. I'll tell you that much. Right. What's the next step? Cool. Vfx Splitter. I mentioned it. Neat. Let's talk about the rest of the face stuff before we make one of these individually. The first thing is going into is actually something really awesome. There's actually already just an impulse response inside the effects section of the impulse folders. That's called piano. Pedal up and down. You hear that just then? Okay. So the two of these, I'm assuming it's someone either slapping a piano or someone slapping something near a piano and then recording it. And that's basically what I needed. I needed this throw this sound through like the modulator of a piano's world. And that's what this is, more or less. And this like pedal up version is perfect. And that's what I'm using with a bit of enveloping. And that's what takes this thing from sounding like this sound like that. The only reason why I keep the dry still involved in there at all is because it's where the nice, like, rigid, notey, real vibe of the harmonics come from, and also the oomph and hit and that kind of thing. And it's better than trying to just leave it out of reverb. So this other guy, though, if you listen to it, you hear all the air, the strings that are reverbing because they're all active and vibrating. And that's something about a piano that's interesting, which is that while it's true they're all kind of dampened because when you're not playing them, they're literally the hammer is resting on them until you do this. You put the pedal up. There is still sort of interplay and motion in between them even when you're holding a note. Like, yeah, it's going to vibrate, but it's also going to get affected by what can and can't vibrate at what certain areas around it. And that's what I decided was going to be this dude's job, to mimic, which I put on top of this dude. basically a big old chorus, and it's just there as a light texture, just so that I have that option. In general, I like it to be blended. It's also this is just only wet, and it's also a whole different like EQ structure that's lighter and less, so that I'm not worried so much about it clashing with this. And then I wanted to go over the compression. So the compression is just one of these actions where I was trying to angle on not having to EQ after the fact. I mean, I would have to if I were mixing this into a song, regardless of how good I made it sound. But the purpose is, I carved out where I knew where the treble area would be, and I prepared to kind of turn it down ahead of time. I also turned down the low end, although this does still create a profile that is still pretty smiley looking. It sort of looks like, because this is brought down more dB than the mid, that means that the lower end is less than the mid, and it's really only just even with it. Which is a bit of a reality that's true about like stringy things in general, is that they often don't have the power to fully represent their actual harmonic amplitude, because I feel like that's a physical impossibility if your ends are clipped. And that comes through like that. Like the lower harmonic is there, but it's not the most powerful thing in the stack like it is in the perfect saw wave. Cool. Yeah, so that's it for the whole face stuff. So now let's talk about making the thing an individual string. So the idea is we're going to make a string, and then basically the thought is, cool, then we just do 2 of them, then we do 3 of them, and then that represents our pitch ranges. There's something more complicated happening with the way I did the bass strings in this one, and some of the stuff I made were also just decisions that were taking care of problems that I could have solved better by doing this a little bit more elegantly every time I do this. That pretty much happens, but whatever. So step 1 is to turn this perfect saw wave into an imperfect kind of stringy tone, and the fastest way to that is this is phase randomness per harmonic. So it is starting the new phase in some different place, but it's also doing that differently for every individual harmonic. So it's not just a solid saw anymore, pretty much at all. It's the least solid saw. After this, we get the low pass stuff involved. I went over the phaser things last time, and we're still going to do that, but the actual like articulation of what we're doing is going to be in the low pass. Plus, there is some fun velocity shenanigans I applied using on this knob here. So, low pass. One crucial element of this is going to be how the width applies to sounds. And by that what I mean is when you play a lower velocity, you get a thinner profile. So that's one of the things that shows up. And you can see that kind of already contributes to a low pass-ish sort of result if the low pass is that low. And to that end, what I do to do a thing here, so let's do decay, loop in, yeah, big old pluck. But the pluck is fast as heck, the hammer pluck. So I went over this last time, but if you're going to mimic some things, longer, sloper, sleepy, this is a very sweepy, bowish kind of experience. This is sort of the opposite, a hammer kind of experience. And a really sharp one of these is a pick experience, where you come down real sharp on the other end. And that's kind of what we're doing to this. A lot of the hammer reality is going to come from some other stuff, but this is going to come off kind of pickish. A switch. So check out what this knob does. Controls the depth of this dude, and it has its own articulator. Doesn't have an envelope, that'd be hilarious. But what it does have is a velocity mapping. What it means is that if I hit a lower note, it doesn't pick as hard. And if I hit a harder note, it does. And that's something. So that's just there as kind of a reality. But then also something that's responsible here is that I have an extremely long, just sustained drop. With the goal here being that naturally, like a regular piano, what's happening here can't be sustained forever. But it needs to be sustained longer than that. So just scroll way the hell out here, and I just turned on tempo mode so we can see the bars. That's what all these represent. So that's kind of a huge one. And you can have it take longer or not, depending on like your hit strength. But I wouldn't like, because this along with our velocity change, if I do like velocity, this isn't really as deep a cut. So you can sort of play around with when you're playing different velocity notes. It's sort of like thinking like you're widening this concept visually here, which is a bit like, I guess, what it feels like to play a thing. But yeah, the next step is to make this do the string thing, which involves pulse width modulation in real life, but in additive life, it means engaging this phaser with the harmonic mode because that's its version of doing so. Like that. So you bring it all the way down, and you want to move the offset once the speed is off to a position where there is no longer audio. That means that you're essentially at PWM 0, and then you move your width, and now you're representing the action that you get when you PWM a saw. Square, jeez. So, like we did, this is what I mentioned about it being the high pass action, where this essentially is doing the high pass action, and the hitting of it is like with the regular phase action, part of the hitting of the string that makes it like a string. Now this guy also needs to get lots of changes done to it. In particular, that the velocity changes. But not that drastically, because we're not actually changing position so much. It's just that there is a teensy little bit of an adjustment made. I'm not even sure I really did this for the other guy, but yeah. Anyway, you really want to make some randomness. I do that. And yeah, so just so that the position is never really never really super duper duper the same. Now, this is sounding really synthy and really weird. And now the next step that makes this like the real thing. Oh, wait, no. Follow the list. Pluck. Yes, cool. So now you'd think we just, took care of that, but there's something fun about the pluck, which is that its job in life is that you can create a kind of a time fall off sort of shape. So if I go to here and do velocity, this is this result. Yeah. Now, on most of this, because now we got to go to here and also do some stuff we showed done earlier, which was make the ramping low, which creates a pluckier pluck. Turn out smooth mod, rather, which applies to automation here, and I think on all the rest of the stuff. And we're not doing that yet, we might, and I need to care, so I do. Perfect, and this means that your automations that have specific sharp curves will actually be their specific sharpness and not the sort of like less resolution interpolated version. Now, over here, we're going to take the blur, and we want it to be after the phaser and the pluck, but before the filter. We want the pluck after too? Yeah, that's what we want. I think it is. And we'll find out, because what we do is we turn on our time here. And that starts to, it blurs. So the blurring thing that's handy here is that it takes these really sharp defined moments and it spreads them out in a way that's not just if it were being crossfaded. And it is a little bit doing the job of what reverb's doing. And in the case of what necessarily is reverbing at this level, because didn't we do that with the piano bench thing? In this case, it's sort of like the inside of the string, because it's what causes these little tiny junks. That doesn't sound like a piano at all, but when it was actual pluck, yeah, that bit. And then the idea that we're trying to get is we match up keyboard tracking on how high or low the filter is to specifically just line up with when it sounds like the correct place. In this case, since this is just us string, this is probably work better. That sounds kind of okay as a low one. So here's why I did two voices. One of the things that immediately makes this sound better as a piano thing is hearing even a little bit of that forward phase cancellation. Now, the low end wants it, but it doesn't want a lot of it. And this is where I had to get real special with this and also the Prism. So the first specialness with this, a big part of it is keyboard mapping, and so that when it's low, it's more. And then also keyboard mapping this, so that when it's low, it's wider. So the higher notes kind of clash a little tighter. And because this is supposed to be one string, this is where I go to the unison index mapping and I lower one of the voices because I'm not panning it. So now this is just one of those conflicting voices is less, so that means the conflict is less. Now that perfect regularity sounds weird, so this is when I mess with this particular window. The unison is what's causing it, that perfection and sliding this. So if you make the... It still does it, but it doesn't sound like that sort of original synthetic perfection. Another thing I did to screw with this is a fun trick where I put a 2 here to 2 here. So this is the Octave Switcher. This is... So 2 divided by 2 is just 1, so this is where it was. But the benefit of doing this is that we can't go lower than 1. I can't actually go lower than that. And this means that if I want to, because like I say, I do this, which does like audibly detune it. This means that I need to bring it down by that much for it to match again. So I have to go up, up, and then down to, or maybe down 4 now that I think about it, but either way, that balances out. Now, why I did that at all is because what that little detune button does is that this is not the octave one. This spreads it from the harmonic up. So it's a multiplier. As opposed to actually, I guess, yeah, this multiplier and this is an additioner. It's a bit weird to talk about it because it's not super linear to begin with, but the whole reason I do that is because when I play octaves, we don't want the situation where it sounds like it's the same instrument because the harmonics are so rigidly perfect that they just overlap perfectly. And the way to solve that is by creating these irregularities that don't add up like correctly scaled wise. But we also don't want to damage how in tune it sounds. You might have even heard it be a little bit off tune at the beginning of this with the demo from the finished version. And it's because the switch from that guy to the other dude, this dude is still a little bit off. Might be because I need to go -4. But onward with this concept is what the Prism does. Because the Prism's job in life is to spread the shape of these in pitch according to this particular shape. Low end, high end. So if I flatten this out, and let it like ride up there, this is saying that nothing's happening in the first half of this, but a whole bunch is happening up here, which is good because you hear how rigid that sounds. That's happening because it's all really way too aligned, and you get that out of alignment a number of ways, and one of those ways is just having to be different pitches. But the lower the frequency you go, the more the off pitch it is has a harder, worse effect. And in this regard, you can also just go ham on the high end and have it be enough to do the job. You can even be special and do one of these. I need single curve that you are. And then to also be fun, I'm already in here, I like to be random. When you hear it sound kind of like a stand-up bass, that's how you know you're sort of in the right direction. Because a little bit, it's a similar string structure. And if you get that sort of behavior on the hit, then you can get it sort of behaving the way you need to. I'm already doing it. Oh, I'm doing this. So I do also do a volume thing. Similar, you do the hammer here deal. But I don't go full hammer because I'm already doing technically the volume articulation with the rest of the dude, so it can just be on all the way. But what I do need it to do is to do one of those quick come downs on the decay, because the piano does that. Like when the piano gets hit real hard, it gets a lot of energy and it's real loud, and that is not. So quick attack, like real quick. Yeah, more or less. So actually just doing that, it actually started to make it feel a little bit more like a real piano because it's starting to act like one. Now that we're getting that kind of like bare sketch descriptive reality going, this is where we start putting it into the convolution, and we start cloning up and then making more voices. I decided to do that by having the two first. I made this whole like, this is technically one voice, but I'm lowering it with the thingy choices after the fact. And so if I were to clone it from here, I'd have to undo the volume to unison index choice so that it would be full voicing, and then also get panning involved. Luckily, when you go in here and you go into randomness, you turn on per unison voice, and same for all maps, all of the random things that are happening now happen at different randoms per voice. So it is truly like there are different strings happening. And it is immediately awesome with something like this happening when you fully pan it. So like I'll just clone this up and do that thing I said. Cloned up. And then full volume. And then immediately huge. And a lot of other things like you now can do, like you randomize all the primary options. And randomness is a core element of making this work as an instrument, not necessarily as like a tonal thing. It's not totally about the fact that you hit a string and it's different. That's real. That's just making it feel like you're performing an element, and that when you hit it, it's not always the same. You're not always in control, and you have to like wrangle. That's an instrument thing. So the other wrangling bit of it is that there's a whole side of it that's noise. There's actually like a hit going on in the main bit, and the way I did that was I engaged the noise, which if you've never done it in Harmor, you do by disengaging the octave hertz switch on the frequency of detune, because there's a display version and a generation version. In the display version, it just shows you the math difference. And then in the generated version, it actually applies that difference. And that's something. The way forward here is to make a filter profile that's similar to the other stuff. I think I actually did this with the phaser. Yeah. So funny thing about the noise when it comes to the piano bit is that like its like its string counterpart, it's higher frequency when you hit it harder. So that means you want to do the same sort of velocity stuff that we were doing with the other guy. Oh yeah, and then I had to wonder if there was even a way to make it. I'm not sure that linear, the whole pulse width modulation thing works if the harmonics aren't in harmony. Right, so that meant that I think I just did this with the high pass too. Either way, however you feel like you want to get this done. I think I just did the high pass because I already had the dual going situation. Although I say that, but like a lot of the way forward from here is touch and go about getting all this stuff to align right. So it goes in like that, but the other kind of on business is that there's a big pitch. And then all this stuff is linked to velocity. Same thing with like the width and the stuff the same way that the other guy was. And once you do that and you get that kind of an alignment, and then I'm pretty sure I also did some volume enveloping on this too. I don't know if I cared enough to do the... Yep, that's it. That's how far I went. And then I'll show you what the main looks like with just that. I should have made a noise fader on this. That would have been smart. Let's just listen to two. Which one's active? That's you. So that's just what it sounds like going into the verb. Like if I didn't have the verb on. Yep, there's the volume envelope. I did do the hammer. Look at that. Ah, and I pinched it down with the detune. So that's what that did. Also just playing a really low note right now. It is still note tracking. It is still moving it around up and down the value of notes, even though it's not coming out in harmony. That's kind of what's great about it as noise, as a harmonic source, is that it really feels like it's part of the element. It feels like it's being generated by it. and not just that it's a second layer attached to it. And I feel like I went a long way to making this feel realistic. So there's that. There's also, did I have volume on this? Nope, I don't. So there's the button here. So there's volume and velocity. I turned that off. The reason why I turned that off is not just because I wanted to have control of it, because I actually didn't do that. I keyboard mapped it. Yeah, because the low one really got kind of quiet and it's overpronounced noise. So I needed to layer that together. This is what I mean by touch and go, is that just every moment I would go through, hear how it sounded, compare it, and try and identify the element that's throwing off the realness. And it's a lot of times it's combinatory things like this. See, it doesn't sound really wrong without it. And I have in the past done a pretty good job of futzing with stuff until I've gotten something into a position where it will be doing that regardless. I'm not even using the prism right now, which means that I could be using that to kind of force stuff into weirdness. But the truth of the matter is that there's actually just multiple sources really doing things, because we're not so much hearing the string and then inharmonic stuff coming out of the string. It's the string and the mallet. The mallet is making a sound, and that's what it sounds like. It doesn't really, well, at least well-made one doesn't really make a lot of noise. And then I stopped using that little layer. It's kind of a irresponsibly low note. Everyone on. Right, and the noise was the thing. All right, next thing I wanted to talk about was the unison thing, but I already did numerous times. But just to go over it again, because that's apparently what I'm doing, is the element here. Oh, okay, this actually is something important that I didn't talk about before, but it is this idea that I made the unison pitch thickness start at 0 pitch when the note starts. So there's actually a bit of... You hear that happen? Even this guy. That is the unison doing that. That's what it's really for, especially with the multiple strings. But in the beginning though, that causes a little bit of interference that interferes with the hitting that sounds right at the beginning. So I'll have this come up over time so that it creates more motion over time for the sustain. What even is this one? That's the low guy. Where's the high guy? Now, that's not the end of it though, because the thing I mentioned in the previous video, that what the equivalent of the old world of a piano is that it's like a wavetable sort of device. And the way that this is that if you have an instrument that's a tuned thing, like a brass instrument or a violin, like a real specific sized and set thing that's got the right amount of strings, it's sized and set, is they really only sound right at the right range. And the piano got away with this by having the right string for the right note. We're looking at basically like 120 individual like violins, right? And all the sizes and shapes of everything about it is flowed with it. And that's cool about the shape of the piano, like the wood and everything. The part of the wood that the string is attached to changes the length with the size of the string. And that's a very deliberate item. And in unison land, this translates into that all the unison stuff basically has to change per note. And how far and how fast it all goes is different. Because if it was just a linear setting, then the result would change speed per note. And it does change speed per note, but not linearly, because that's what makes the piano sound good, is that all of the things that would be normally very linear about the string are forced into just a specific position, just a real chosen way that is basically impossible otherwise. And that made it possible to write all things, have all things sound right. I keep being just amazed by the fact that's how this works. That some people had to think of this and come up with this truth to make this accurate. They knew things about the spectrum without anything that we have. It's just nuts. Like those guys that drew black holes before we had like any concept of the ability to see one. Yeah, getting lost. The biggest one that matters though is this guy, the one that does the keyboard track, the unison phase. This is how offset are each of these voices from each other, and that is different on every note is one of the things that's just like that needs to sound kind of right, and that goes a long way to making it work out. Honestly, okay, so that's pretty well it for the sourcing of it. The big kind of specific thing about the high guy though, the higher it goes, the more tight and like not wide the filter had to be. So this keyboard mapping on the width sees it kind of go lower, higher, faster. Because look at how many harmonics that is. It's not a lot of harmonics, but it still has, I mean, there's this going on. But it still has enough of the whole tone to feel like, yeah, that's the relevant, correct harmonic result of a key being pressed. That's close to that guy, which has like 3 or 4 times as much harmonic action. So to keep, because otherwise, well, if I didn't do this, this is one of those nonlinear results. If I didn't do this, is that there would be that much harmonic action, and it would sound ear splitting. If Harmor actually generated it that much, it wouldn't though because it blacks it. But if I had done it like citrus wise, for example, that would have been a thing. Similar deal with the filter. This is why I know these real specific shapes for stuff. It's not so much because I knew that that's the code or whatever, but that like I was real kind of hand by framing it, being like, does it fit? Does it sound like a piano when I do things that a piano should be able to do? Per piece of range. So things like I have this body control up here. And these are all connected to the harmonic blur control up here. At least they should be. Why aren't you? Oh, because you're not. Huh. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Nope, you're all there. That's weird. But you're not. Why aren't you? You're listed. That's very strange. Did I Are you moving? No. What? But you're What is that? This? That's none of this. Oh, I must have hit one of these. No. Very weird. Harmonic blur him out. Oh, it's the B. Oh, I'm an A. I'm a smart person. Haha. Good job, me. All right, now that we wasted lots of time doing that. There it is. Ha 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 ha. So in this is the bit. This is a bit that's like the bit I understand the least. I fundamentally know what the blur does, just on top, and it also has a blur mask, which I use not in any of this guy. I guess I got away with it this time without using that. I did use the phaser mask though. What this does is it stops the phaser from having as much of an impact on a specific area of the spectrum. This is hertz based, so this isn't like when I play a note you can see it moving. You can imagine these harmonic stacks being laid sideways onto here. So when I play low, like these gulfs are around. This is neat though, because this is a bit like this would be the effect of a solid object on a set of strings. That there would be a sort of conformed like, yeah, this one is here, therefore it's affected by this part of the shape, and this one's there, therefore it's affected by that part of the shape. And that's helping the specific realism of this. I came over here to talk about blur, right? So this harmonic blur stuff, you blur it, but then there's a weight. Not only that, but there's a weight that changes weight based on their note and your like velocity. I want to say that is something that you don't even set up. Did I set up anything here? I think I did. There's an articulator. Nope, didn't. Not even. So like, you can't even articulate these guys. You can articulate that one, but I didn't. Oh, I did turn on a little bit of vibrato. I actually wanted to mention that, and that's because I'm using a lot of the primary things that Harmor has to make a lot of the main moves, which means there's not a lot left over for me to do for like tails. And right now, a little bit of that we're hearing is this teensy amount of vibrato that's on here that is also randomized, which means a different depth amounts and speeds. I think just depth, yeah. Speed's not available per either voice. Same thing with the 3 guy. So that's another one of those like it's real kind of thing. But so this harmonic blur has all those properties just going, it just does. I mean, I'm kind of sure that this actual thing is a thing that like is mostly meant to interact because it's already plugged in with the pluck, and I'm not even using the pluck to the extent to use it like that. But I feel like that's a lot of like the actual shortcut to doing this thing I'm trying to do, as opposed to how I ended up doing it. Which to review was to put the blur after my own version of creating the spectral sort of information with the other tools, as opposed to perhaps integrating it with just the way it's already designed to do that. Which, if I do that in the future, you'll know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that actually is it. So, this is, I guess, actually, this is my best shot at doing the piano idea. A lot farther than I thought I would go with it. And because at first it seems like an irresponsible amount of work to know that you're going to have to make 3 sections. You're gonna have to do the one that represents just the 1 string, the one that represents just the 2 strings, and the one that represents the 3 strings. Because there's not really a consistent way to get set up this stuff to be the right kind of linear. Because they are set up to be a kind of linear, but with there being the 3 sections. So they just had to sit down and do it. And I did. And I'm going totally to put on a noise level adjustment on this before I put this patcher up to be downloaded in the description of this video. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All of that fun stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.